the shoulder, and I have that shoulder seam allowance laying out flat now. Again, I'm going to go on the line that is closest to the fabric, and I have the 1/4 inch going up. Let me go right up to the shoulder. Now I'm going to go on the neckline. I'm not going to include the trim. I'm going to go right at the edge where the trim joins So I've done side seam, armhole, shoulder, front neckline. I can go ahead now and do the edge of my placket. And I have a choice now when I come to the hem. I can go ahead and take a pencil and I can just trace off the edge of the hem and then add the seam allowance, because there is no seam allowance here that is in my way. Over here on the side seam I had a 1/4 inch to deal with, so that's why I'm tracing off a 1/4 inch in. And here in the armhole I have this 1/4 inch to deal with, so I made sure I was tracing right on that stitch line. Same with the shoulder, I had to trace in 1/4 of an inch. On the neckline I had to leave that trim alone and trace right where the trim joined the body, right in that ditch there. But at the bottom of the hem, it's completely different. That's why I left it to last. So you can go ahead and use a tracing wheel against the edge, or you can just take your pencil and just sort of lightly trace off what that hem looks like. Now at this point you're probably thinking, well, wait a minute, what about the whole other side? Well, guess what? They're the same. So you may choose to trace off both sides or just one and fold the paper in half. But what we can also do that's pretty clever is we can trace off the back neckline right now too. We are tracing off and making a copy of a symmetrical garment. The right and left sides look the same. The front and back look very similar as well. So here's the back neckline, and I'm tracing this off where the trim joined the seam. And then you want to go back and check. Make sure you understand everything. Can you see all of your little holes? You can quickly give yourself a little mark there just to make sure you understand and can see everything. Now, like I said, I have the choice. I can trace off the whole other side, or I can be done. I feel like being done right now. I know these are symmetrical. So I'm going to leave these pins in here, okay, and I'm going to take a couple of quick measurements like I already did, and I'm going to jot them down here on the side. Right to the side. And I usually take measurements several times just to check. Fabric moves around. Now we're going to take that garment, move it aside, and we're going to take our pattern paper and we're going to fold it, and you're going to lightly crease this on the grain line with your fingers, just real light. Now once you have a nice light crease on the grain line, you can go ahead and press this firmly from right to left, from the center out. That looks good. Now we've gone ahead and we've copied the front and back. We're going to put that aside. I still left the pins in here because I'm working with it. And I'm going to go ahead and copy the sleeve. Here's the paper that I pre-cut to copy or knock off the sleeve. Let's crease this. And let's make a grain line. Going up and down the middle of the paper, and it's also going to be going up and down the middle of the sleeve. There we go, we've got that grain line. We're going to bring back our garment. And I'm going to place the seam allowance flat on the underseam of the sleeve. Just trying to get that flat now. Then I'm going to pull any excess fabric out to the top part of the sleeve, which right here, this is going to be where our grain line is. I'm going to go ahead and place a pin right on that fold over. This folds over from the front to the back and vice versa. Let's get one more pin, but way up over here at the sleeve cap. And then you can see what happens with the sleeve down here at the bottom. It really wants to twist. This is what knits do. I'm going to leave this alone for the moment because this twisting, it really doesn't matter. I'm not going to force it because it won't want to stay like that. Knit in a circle. Circular knit, so they sometimes do that. So we're just going to place a pin down here towards the hem and use that as the grain line. Now I'm going to place the sleeve, and this is the front. We can tell because the neckline is lower in the front. And I almost always do the sleeve front first and the bodice front first in order. Let's go ahead and take that sleeve and place this about 1/8 of an inch away from that grain line so that we can account for that fold. And you can use push pins, pattern weights, a can, etc. to hold that in place, and we're going to pull out the tracing wheel again. And we're going to start up here at the sleeve cap, and I'm going to trace right on the stitch line, right where the seam allowance stops and joins the fabric. And sometimes you have to do this in short little strokes because if you push the whole seam, the armhole and sleeve seam, you're going to distort it. So I just do a little bit at a time. Then I've made it to the underseam. Now I'm going to do the underseam of the sleeve. And like I'm saying, I'm going in 1/4 of an inch because I'm tracing right on the stitch line that's the closest to the fabric. So this here would be a chain stitch, and then here we have like an overlock situation, right? So, but then as I go down, I still want to stay 1/4 of an inch away from that edge, even though that seam is rolled in. I'm pretending it hasn't. Now look, we're down here at the bottom of the hem, and I can go ahead and just trace this off. Look, there's where the hem starts. Before we yank everything up, let's just look. Did we get everything? Good, we have a nice continuous line. And this makes an X mark, and if you can't see it, go ahead and make sure X marks the spot. Let's make sure we have the whole sleeve cap before I lift this up completely too. Yes, but let me go ahead and darken that a little bit. Yes, it's nice and continuous. Now, this is the front, so I usually just put an F on that real quick before I flip this over and make the back sleeve. I'm going to use this and line up the sleeve, the garment, again about 1/8 of an inch away from the grain line. I'm going to match that hem down there, and I'm going to match the cap up here at the top, the sleeve cap, sleeve hem, under sleeve. And this is a sleeve cap joining the armhole of the body. Okay, that looks good. Let's grab our tracing wheel, and let's start by, because the armhole's, the underarm's close to me, I'm going to start right here at my underarm. And we know that seam is rolling in, so I'm just going to go ahead and mark off 1/4 of an inch. Look, now you know a trick how to copy out that sleeve, the edge of it, because it's wobbly. We're just going to go ahead and use our pencil. Made a straight hem, we can fix that later. And then now we have the sleeve cap. And the seam allowance sort of shifts around, so I'm going to hold it to one side, pushing it to one side. Right on the stitch line, closest to the fabric of the sleeve. Have the seam allowance out. Okay, good. And here we have the underseam crossing the sleeve cap. Now, can I see everything? No, I can't see it very clearly, so that's why I haven't taken the whole thing up. You lay that back down again. I was being too gentle with my own garment, and I need to press this a little bit harder up here at the top since I'm going through a few layers, including some seam allowance from the front. Now let's look. Did I catch it? Yes, I did. Let me connect those. Okay, now it's connected. And that was the back. Good. Now we have the front bodice and a copy of the back neckline, and we have the sleeve. Let's take that sleeve and put that aside and grab our front and back bodice. So now you're going to take your pencil, and you have a couple of rulers to work with, and we're going to trace off the lines that we have made with the tracing wheel. We can sort of see them, so you can go ahead and draw in some of the lines. So here I see my side seam, and I'm going to use a ruler that helps me to connect this in one long line. There, that's connecting it. And this is my side seam I'm working on. And we see here from the waist down that the side seam curves out. And then I'm going to flip my curve ruler and capture all the curves and blend them so it looks nice and continuous on my side seam. Let's work on the hem. Looks good. Our hem our side seam. Now we're going to work on our armhole and our shoulder seam. There's our shoulder seam. There's our armhole. I'm going to connect those dots with this curve ruler, trying to make this look continuous as one long curved line. So I'm using the curve ruler in this direction. I love the French curve for everything. And then I'm going to flip it over to do the bottom of the armhole. Trying to end up with a little bit of a right angle here. I can correct that later. Now I'm going to work on truing up my necklines. Here's my front neckline. I have to flip the ruler a few different ways to capture the whole curved line. And there's the outline of the bodice. That's the front bodice. And we would need to put seam allowance on this. And if we cut it double, we open it up, we have the whole pattern. So let's go ahead and put that back neckline in. That's going to join at the same place on the shoulder. We have the back neckline in. So I've trued up my pattern. Let's go ahead and draw another grain line parallel to the one that we already have because the other one is on a fold. We can draw some arrows going up and down. That shows that the fabric is non-directional. And then this can be our front